I have never forgotten that night. The night everything inside me cracked open like a house abandoned too long, its walls splitting apart, the air thick with mildew. If I had to describe it, I would say it was like standing at the threshold of a place I once called home, only to realize it had become a ruin I could never step into again. The lake house had always been the symbol of my family. Every summer my father drove us out here, the trunk stuffed with groceries, charcoal for grilling, my mother's stack of books, and the excited laughter of children bouncing in the back seat. My sister and I would race to the dock, plunging into the water before we'd even finished unpacking. Back then, I thought this was our safe place, a sanctuary bound by love. But on that night, the air inside was heavy, almost sour. The wooden walls that once smelled like sunshine and pine now carried the faint, sharp odor of old liquor and dust. Laughter echoed in the dining room, but it wasn't the laughter I remembered from childhood. It had a jagged edge, the kind that cuts more than it warms. When I stepped in, the long table was nearly full. My father sat at the head, his posture straight, his face carved into quiet lines that gave away little. He cradled a glass of wine as if it were an anchor. My mother hovered up and down, adjusting napkins, refilling plates, fussing with the silverware as though if her hands kept moving, she could keep the evening from collapsing. Claire, my sister, was radiant in a dark red dress, her hair cascading in perfect waves over her shoulders. Joel, her husband, leaned close, whispering something into her ear that made them both laugh out loud. The glow on their faces was T-E-T warmth. It was the glow of people who knew they owned the stage. Uncle Robert, already on his second glass of whiskey, sat back with his round belly pressing against the table's edge. When I entered, he tilted his head in acknowledgement but didn't pause his conversation with Joel. I slipped off my coat, hung it carefully, and took the empty seat beside my father. For a moment, no one addressed me except for a nod here and there. That wasn't unusual. I had grown used to being invisible in this family, and so the silence barely stung anymore. Mother placed a steaming bowl of chicken soup before me. "Eat, dear," she murmured quickly, her voice brisk, as though feeding me were a chore to check off before she hurried back to her other tasks. I nodded, lifted a spoon, and tasted the broth. Ginger and garlic floated faintly on the steam, but my throat felt too dry to swallow. Conversation carried on without me. Joel recounted a recent business deal. Robert bragged about booking tea times for golf. My mother mentioned neighborhood gossip. My father drank and said little. I sat quietly, chewing mechanically, an audience to a play that had rehearsed itself countless times without needing me. Then came the sound, a crisp, metallic ting, ting, as a knife tapped against glass. Claire had risen. Her smile was bright enough to light the room, but her eyes glittered with something sharp. Triumph, or perhaps malice. "Everyone," she began, voice clear. "Tonight isn't just another family dinner. We've had a little discussion, and the decision, well, it's unanimous." My hand froze on my spoon. My heartbeat slowed to a steady, deliberate thud. I had seen this moment coming. I never thought I would become an outsider in my own family. But if I'm being honest, the feeling of being pushed aside had crept into me long before that night by the lake. There are memories that never fade, no matter how hard you try to bury them. I remember being 10 years old, with Claire only 8. We were playing in the backyard, and I had built a little tent out of blankets tied between 2 wooden stakes. Excited, I called out for Mom, eager for her to see, hoping she'd be proud of how clever I was. But when Mom stepped outside, her eyes immediately went to Claire, who was simply sitting on the grass doodling a few clumsy flowers on paper. "Oh my goodness, my Claire has such artistic talent," she exclaimed, rushing over to hug her. "One day, you'll be a famous painter. I just know it." I stood there, the crooked blanket tent still swaying behind me, my heart sinking. I didn't feel jealous, not really. I just felt invisible. And that invisibility clung to me for years to come. My father was a quiet man. He taught me how to tie a fishing knot, how to change the oil in the car, but he never praised me, not once. I think he believed that silence meant approval, that I should just understand without him saying it. But silence leaves a void, and I grew up surrounded by those voids. Claire was different. She was the golden child. When she sang a little song at the elementary school concert, the whole family showed up with flowers, cameras, cheering like she was headlining Broadway. When she dropped out of college her first year because she didn't feel inspired, they praised her courage for living true to herself. When she traveled across Europe on our parents' dime, everyone called it a priceless life experience. And me? I started working at 19. 2 jobs while attending classes, scraping by to pay my own tuition. I never asked for handouts. I never dared to. Occasionally, I'd get a curt comment from my father. It's good to be independent. And that was that. Years later, I realized I had become the shadow in the family, silent but always present when they needed something. When Dad had a toothache that required surgery, I wired the money. When Mom complained about overdue utility bills, I sent a few $100s. When our cousin Laura couldn't cover her college tuition, I stepped in. At first, I told myself it was love. Helping was my way of belonging, of proving I mattered. But slowly, my help turned into obligation. Obligation became expectation. Expectation hardened into outright demand. They began to tease me at dinners. Ethan must be rolling in cash to bring a wine this nice. Ethan has no kids, no responsibilities. No wonder he's always on time. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, hiding my discomfort behind the rim of my glass. But then the jokes grew sharper. Ethan's so cold. No wonder he's still alone. Ethan has no idea what real pressure feels like. Ethan's just bitter because nobody needs him. I sat there smiling weakly, saying nothing. But deep down, I knew the truth. They needed me. Constantly. Not out of love, but out of convenience. I was the lifeline they clung to, the golden goose they didn't even bother to hide. When Joel, Claire's husband, lost his job, Claire called me at midnight, sobbing into the phone. "Ethan, I don't know how we'll pay rent. Please, just this once, help us." And I did. When their car broke down, when their child needed therapy, when they dreamed of opening a little cafe, every emergency, every whim, they all found their way to me. I became the emergency contact, the first number they dialed in every storm. And me, the fool, always answered, "Of course." Once, half joking, I said, "Next time I'll have to charge interest." The table erupted with laughter, calling me stingy. None of them knew my wallet was nearly empty that night. I worked myself to the bone. Mornings at the office, evenings consulting on the side. I lived frugally, rarely buying myself anything. Yet, whenever my family needed help, I scraped together what little savings I had. I kept thinking, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time they'll see me. But I was wrong. Claire's arrogance grew bolder. She treated asking me for money as an unquestionable privilege. "If you don't help me, who else will?" she'd say in that half-playful, half-commanding tone. Once, I told her no. Just once. She wanted me to co-sign a business loan, and I refused. Simple. Firm. The next day, I found myself blocked from her phone. On social media, she posted about cutting off toxic people. The words were bitter, cruel. But what hurt more was my family's silence. They didn't call. They didn't ask. They simply nodded along as though everything I had done all those years meant nothing. Instead of sadness, something else rose inside me, a clarity. I began collecting proof. Not for revenge, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining it. I recorded every bank transfer, every email, every text, every date. Year after year, the numbers stacked up. By the time I totaled it, the sum had climbed past $78,000. I paid for Joel's rehab. I paid for Dad's back surgery. I paid off Mom's credit card debt. I paid Laura's tuition. And once I paid for a so-called family emergency that turned out to be their vacation in Cabo. Not once did anyone offer to pay me back. When I stopped giving, I became the problem. When I refused, I became the toxic one. When I stayed silent, I became invisible. So when Claire stood up at the lake house dinner and declared I was no longer part of the family, I wasn't surprised. I just felt empty. But I had prepared for that moment. The folder of documents was ready, sitting by my chair. And when Claire opened it, screaming in shock, I knew the reckoning had finally come. They thought I'd always be their doormat. But I was done. I knew this moment would come. For years, I had lived in a loop, giving, staying silent, enduring. I once believed that if I tolerated it just a little longer, they would eventually see me, maybe even understand. But silence only feeds contempt. My silence had raised it like a spoiled child until it towered over me. The house by the lake glowed bright tonight under warm golden lights, its reflection shimmering across the glassy still water. I could still recall the smell of pine wood seeping from the walls, blending with roasted meat and wine. It was the kind of scene that should have been comforting, like something out of a painting. But to me, it felt staged, like a set for a play whose ending I already knew by heart. A long table stretched across the living room, draped in a white cloth. Silver candlesticks flickered, roses stood in a glass vase. The chatter was lively. Forks scraped against plates. Children darted outside on the porch, their laughter ringing through the open doors. I sat at the far end, half hidden by the shadows beyond the chandelier's reach. The food on my plate remained untouched. I lifted a glass of red wine, took a sip, and tasted nothing but bitterness. As always, Claire was the center of attention. She wore a tight-fitting blue dress, gold bracelets catching the candlelight, her shrill laughter drowning out all other voices. Every now and then, she leaned into Joel, whispering something that made both of them burst out in exaggerated amusement. My mother, Margaret, hovered around, topping off glasses, spooning more food onto plates, smiling as if the world would collapse if she didn't. My father, Richard, sat heavy and silent, occasionally muttering some flat remark before sinking back into wordlessness. And then, as though she had rehearsed it, Claire rose to her feet. She tapped her spoon against her wine glass until the room quieted. All eyes turned toward her. "I have something to say," she declared, her voice sharp, her eyes sparkling in the light. "This is a family gathering, a moment for honesty. And I think we can all agree, Ethan is no longer really part of this family." For a breath, I heard only the wind against the window. Then came the clapping, hesitant at first, then rolling across the table. Laughter followed, nods of approval. My mother laughed too, though it sounded unnatural, like she laughed only because silence would betray her. My father spoke just one line, hoarse and flat. Maybe that's for the best. I didn't move. Everything unfolded exactly as I had imagined. No anger, no sadness, only a cold emptiness filling my chest. I set my glass down gently, slid my jacket aside, and reached into my bag. I placed a thick black leather folder on the table, right in front of Claire. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed sharp in the silence. "If you want it official," I said evenly, "then read this." Claire arched her brow, sneering. "What now, Ethan?" She lifted the folder, flicked it open, and in an instant, her face drained of color. Confidence turned to trembling. She dropped the papers as though they burned her. A scream tore out of her throat, shattering the air. Her chair crashed to the floor. Joel rushed forward, snatched the folder, flipping page after page. His hands shook. His eyes widened. The room fell deathly quiet. Everyone held their breath. Inside those pages lay the naked truth. Bank statements showing regular transfers from my account. Emails marked urgent. Midnight texts, short, frantic. "Please, just this once. I'll pay you back in a week." Mixed in were screenshots of family group chats, threads filled with their jokes at my expense. Claire had written, "Ethan always acts so serious. He must be going insane with loneliness." A cousin had chimed in, "Yeah, the guy only has his job and his sofa." Strings of laughing emojis followed. Joel's voice broke the silence, rough and disbelieving. Is this real, Claire?" She stammered, her face turning red, then pale. It's fake. He made all this up. Ethan forged it to humiliate me." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Forged? Should I pull out my laptop and show you the originals? Should I play the voice messages you sent me at midnight? Or would you prefer Mom and Dad confirm the times you begged me to wire money within the hour so you wouldn't be evicted?" Claire trembled, her lips pressed tight. I turned to Joel, looked him dead in the eye. "Did you know your trip to Europe last year was supposedly a medical emergency? I wired $3,000, thinking it was for treatment, but it paid for your vacation. I have the hotel invoice too." Joel froze. Shock gave way to fury. He slammed the folder down, papers scattering across the table. "Claire, what the hell is this?" Around us, whispers spread, faces flushed with unease. Margaret clutched her chest, staring between me and Claire as though reality were slipping through her hands. My father kept his head low, his eyes avoiding mine, his silence heavier than words. I drew a long breath, my voice calm but cutting. "Dad, Mom, how many bills have I paid over the years? Dad's back surgery, Mom's credit card debt, Laura's tuition, Claire's endless loans, even Joel's rehab. I carried it all. I never complained. I never asked for a single thing back. But not once did I hear the words, 'Thank you.' Only silence. And then another request. And another. My mother's voice quivered. 'Ethan, I didn't know you kept track of every little thing. It's not about keeping track,' I cut her off. It's about the truth. I needed proof to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that the weight I've felt all these years wasn't just in my head." Richard drained his glass, avoiding my eyes. Shame flickered across his face, but he never let it take form. I looked around the table, meeting each gaze. "I stayed silent too long. I let you turn me into an ATM, into your doormat. But tonight, that ends." Claire's scream cracked the air. "You can't do this! You're my brother! You can't walk away!" My eyes met hers, cold as stone. "No, Claire, I was your brother, but you trampled that bond over and over again. Family isn't about bleeding someone dry. Family is supposed to lift each other up. I did my part, you never did yours." The silence stretched long. The fireplace popped and hissed, each spark underlining my words. Someone sighed. Someone else lowered their head. I gathered the papers back into the folder, tucked it under my arm, and stood. My coat hung over my hand. My voice was steady. "Tonight, you think you've won by casting me out. But the truth is, you've only revealed yourselves. And me. I'm finally free." I turned, walking slowly toward the door. Each step felt like cutting another rope that had bound me for years. My hand touched the knob when Claire's voice cracked behind me. "You regret this. You'll end up alone." I glanced back, calm, almost smiling. "I've been alone in this family for a long time, Claire. The only difference now is that I don't have to pretend anymore." I opened the door. The night air rushed in, cold, carrying the scent of pine and the damp breath of the lake. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. Behind me, the house blazed like a sealed box. Ahead, the darkness stretched wide, open, and I stepped into it, unburdened, knowing everything was only just beginning. I walked away from the lake house with the cold wind hissing through the pines. The golden light spilling from the windows cast a crooked streak across the driveway. Behind me, laughter, shouting, the scrape of chairs blurred into a distant hum. At last, the wooden door shut firmly behind me, like the final punctuation mark at the end of a long, merciless sentence. Sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, I realized I was breathing hard. but it wasn't fear, not worry. What I felt was closer to release, as though I had finally shrugged off the massive stone that had pressed against my chest for years. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I turned toward the old dock on the lake, the spot I used to escape to in high school whenever my parents' arguments rattled the house. The wooden benches were still there, worn and splintered, facing the black water that gleamed with moonlight. I sat down, folded my arms, and let my eyes drift over the still surface. For the first time in years, I exhaled a long breath without worrying who might hear. In the days that followed, my phone never stopped buzzing. Calls and texts poured in, relentless. I didn't answer. I didn't reply. My voicemail filled with voices I knew too well. Angry, pleading, manipulative, weeping. My mother called the most. At first, her tone carried the authority I remembered. "Ethan, what you did was wrong. You humiliated Claire in front of everyone. You provoked Joel's anger. Do you want this family destroyed? Come back right now." On the second day, her voice softened, the edges blunted by guilt. "I know I haven't always been fair. But what you did that night, it was cruel, Ethan. Did you think about Ellie? She's been crying non-stop, asking for her uncle." By the third day, when I pressed play on my voicemail, all I heard were sobs. "Ethan, please. Joel's threatening divorce. Claire is falling apart. Your father stormed out in rage. Everything's chaos. I don't know what to do. You're my son. Please, come back to me." I listened quietly, but my heart didn't tremble the way it once would have. Instead, a deep weariness settled in, a heaviness older than my bones. One morning, as I brewed coffee, I heard the faint rustle of paper at my front door. A cream-colored envelope slid under the frame. I knew instantly whose handwriting sprawled across it, angled, slanted letters I had seen on birthday cards, permission slips, notes tucked in my lunchbox, my mother's hand. I carried it to the table. My fingers shook slightly as I tore it open. 3 full pages, her writing filling every line. The first began simply, "My son." I read slowly. Each sentence tugged me back to childhood. The days she scribbled reminders like, "Don't forget your jacket, it's chilly outside." But these words were heavier, older, steeped in regret. "I'm sorry. I know I let you carry too much. I trusted Claire too blindly. I listened to your father too often. I never asked what you needed, only what you could give. I was wrong, Ethan." I set the page down, closed my eyes. A part of me wanted to believe her instantly, to rush home, wrap my arms around her, and forgive. But another part, the wiser part, whispered, "Haven't you heard this before? Every apology is only the prelude to another request." I drew in a breath and read on. The second page shifted in tone. The apologies dissolved into lamentations. "Your father's health has worsened. He coughs through the nights but refuses to see a doctor. Claire has lost her way. Joel says he'll leave her. Ellie is confused, frightened. The bank threatens to take the lake house. I can't hold this family together." My chest tightened. I'd seen this script too many times, pile on the hardships, underline the despair, then plant the weight squarely on my shoulders. I turned to the third page, and there it was, the inevitable plea. "Ethan, please, just help me this once. A sum to pay the bank, a little to help Claire stabilize. After that, everything will be different. I promise never to trouble you again. But right now, you are my only hope. Don't abandon us." My only hope. The words pierced me like a blade. I placed the letter on the table and sat still for hours. Memories surged. Canceled vacations so I could wire Claire money. Sleepless nights shuffling funds for Dad's hospital bills. Cutting company meetings short because Mom called with an emergency. And every single time they swore, just this once. It was never the last. I lifted the letter again, studying the strokes of her pen. Some rushed, some shaky, but the rhythm was familiar. A voice designed to stir guilt, honed over years of practice. This time, though, I noticed something new. Perhaps only the first few sentences had come from her heart. The rest read like a formula, one she knew by memory, aimed to pull me back into the cycle. I asked myself, did she truly regret, or did she only fear losing her safety net? Was I her son, or just the emergency fund, the shield to catch every mistake? A strange feeling welled up. Pain, but also calm. Pain that she chose the same old way. Calm that I finally saw it clearly, no longer fooled. The dull thud as it hit the bottom sounded final. Inside me, though, was not emptiness, but a fragile lightness. The city glittered like a field of stars scattered across the earth. I held a glass of wine, sipping slowly, listening to the steady beat of my own heart. I recalled her words, "You are my only hope." For so long, that phrase bound me like chains, shaping me into a shadow of myself. But that evening, I whispered into the wind, "No, I'm not anyone's only hope. I'm just Ethan, and that's enough." For the first time, peace felt real. That afternoon, the sky was heavy and gray, clouds pressed together like a thick blanket. I had left work early, driving back toward my apartment, when I noticed a figure standing by the door. Even from a distance, I knew the shape of those narrow shoulders, that rigid posture that seemed fragile yet stubborn. It was my mother. I slowed, parked by the curb, and stayed in the car for several long minutes. Part of me wanted to turn around and disappear. Another part knew I couldn't. She stood there in a beige wool coat, her hands knotted tightly in front of her, her gaze fixed on my door as though she were praying for it to open on its own. I drew a long breath, stepped out, and shut the car door behind me. The sound made her start. She turned quickly, her eyes swollen and red, and I realized she had been crying for a long time. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling. I stopped a few feet away, keeping the distance. "What are you doing here, Mom?" "My son. I need to speak with you. Not on the phone, not in letters, face to face, just once." I didn't answer. She walked toward me, hesitant, every step measured as if she feared I might run. Inside the apartment, I poured her a glass of water and set it on the table. She took it in her hands but didn't drink. Her eyes clung to me, filled with shame and pleading. "Ethan, I know I was wrong. That night, I shouldn't have laughed. I shouldn't have taken Claire's side. I was blind. But you must understand, I only wanted to hold this family together. I didn't want anyone to see the cracks. And then you made everything collapse." I leaned back in the chair, my voice steady. "Mom, it didn't collapse because I spoke the truth. It collapsed because you and Claire built everything on lies." She shook her head, tears spilling freely. I know. But now, Claire has lost everything. Joel left her, her friends turned away, her business is collapsing. She's shattered, Ethan. I'm afraid. I'm afraid she'll do something reckless. You're her brother. You can't turn your back." My hands clenched in my lap. Inside me, a storm roared. I saw again the image of Claire that night, laughing as everyone raised their hands against me. And now she was the victim? "Mom," I said slowly. "For years, every time Claire failed, you came to me. When she was in debt, I paid. When she lied, I covered for her. When she cried, I was forced to soothe her. But when I fell, when I was humiliated, who stood with me?" She dropped her gaze. Her hands shook, the glass of water trembling along with them. And then, there was a knock at the door. I frowned, rose, and opened it. And the person I least wanted to see was standing there. Claire. She was thinner, her face hollow, dark shadows under her eyes. The moment she saw me, she broke down, rushing in before I could close the door. "Ethan," she sobbed. "Please, listen to me, just once." I stood firm by the doorway, forcing my voice into ice. "I think everything is already clear." "No," she screamed, her eyes bloodshot. "You don't understand. I was wrong, I know that. But I never meant to hurt you on purpose. I was jealous of you. All my life, people praised you. Smart, obedient, perfect. And me, I was always the failure. I wanted to prove I was worth something, and I kept slipping further. A bitter laugh escaped me. So your jealousy made me your wallet? Your punching bag? The family's fool? That's how you proved your worth? Claire collapsed onto the floor, her face buried in her hands, crying uncontrollably. Her sobs filled the apartment, stabbing at my chest. Not with pity, but with the painful familiarity of it all. How many times had I heard this same cry, only to be guilted into forgiveness? My mother sat silently, her own eyes wet, caught like a prisoner between us. I turned away, forcing calm into my tone. So, you cry, and Mom cries. Then what? You want me to pay your debts again? Cover the mortgage? Beg Joel to come back? That's the plan, isn't it? Claire lifted her head, tears streaking her face, her voice raw. Ethan, just this once, I swear. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. I'll have nothing left. I searched her eyes, looking for sincerity, but what I found was not remorse, only desperation, a clawing need to cling to me as a lifeline. Claire, I said, measured and slow, I'm not your life raft anymore. You'll have to learn to swim. If you don't, you'll sink, and that will be your choice, not my fault. Silence fell heavy in the room. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like hammer blows. Suddenly, my mother stood and grabbed my hands, her eyes desperate. Ethan, please, she's your sister. You can hate me, but don't abandon her. If you don't help, she'll die. Do you want that on your conscience forever? Her words struck like a blade. For a moment, guilt surged in me, suffocating and familiar. But then, clarity cut through. This was the same trap, the same cycle I had lived all my life. Mom always twisted my sacrifice into a duty, my love into chains. I pulled free, stepping back. My voice was calm, sharp as glass. Mom, if Claire dies because she can't face her mistakes, that's not my sin. It's the consequence of her own choices, just like you and Dad must face the consequences of enabling her. I can't carry it anymore. She froze, stunned. Claire cried harder, collapsing onto the floor again. I walked to the door and opened it. My words were final. I'm sorry, but this is the last time I'll listen to this. Go home. From now on, my life is no longer part of this cycle. They didn't leave at once. My mother stood rooted, eyes blurred with tears while Claire whimpered on the floor. I waited, unmoving, beside the open door. At last, Mom pulled Claire to her feet. Without looking back at me, they left, their figures fading into the dim hallway. I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled slowly. This time, no trembling. Only a vast, steady quiet spreading through me. That night, I didn't sleep right away. I sat on the balcony watching a soft rain drift over the city. Far-off car horns blended with the drizzle, forming a lullaby. And I realized I had crossed the last threshold. There would be no return. The sadness lingered, because after all, they were my blood. But beneath the sorrow, a flame flickered. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I knew my life belonged to me. I whispered into the rain, steady and certain. I chose myself, and this time, I won't change my mind. I never thought I would return to the lakeside house on a winter morning like this. Not out of anger, not with a plan for revenge, but with a quiet heart. Accepting, ready to let go. The water in front of the house lay still, mirroring the dull, frozen sky. Trees stood bare, their branches stripped of leaves, as if even nature itself had paused its breath. I stopped the car, gazing at the familiar wooden house from a distance. That house once held my childhood, and it was also the place where I had been cast aside without mercy. But today, it awaited me for something different, an ending. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard the door creak open. The first to appear was my mother. She was thinner than I remembered, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes carrying a quiet weariness. But the moment she saw me, a light flared inside them, like a spark catching in the heart of winter. "Ethan." Her voice trembled. I didn't answer right away. I simply nodded, moving closer. She hesitated for a second before opening her arms, and I let myself fall into her embrace, like a child coming home after a storm. Her arms quivered, but they were warm. I heard the faint sob rise from her chest, and suddenly the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. Inside the living room, everyone was there. My father sat heavily in his armchair, his veined hands locked tightly on his knees. Claire stood near the window, her once proud eyes now clouded with uncertainty. Joel stood beside her, fidgeting, unsure where to place his hands. Uncle Robert sighed quietly, avoiding direct eye contact. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was so thick I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, my father broke it. His voice was hoarse, no longer carrying the sharp command I grew up with. "Thank you for coming, Ethan. I know this isn't easy, but we need to talk." I nodded. "I want that too." Mother poured tea, setting a cup before each of us, then sat beside Father. That simple act stirred old memories of family dinners, where she had always tried to preserve the illusion of harmony. But now, I could see, she was no longer trying to hide anything. Claire spoke next. Her voice was no longer sharp like that night of betrayal. Instead, it carried an unfamiliar hesitation. "Ethan, I know I was cruel. The way I exposed everything. It shamed us all. But you were right. You were always the one holding us up, even when no one saw it. You didn't deserve what we did to you." I stayed silent, studying her. My sister, the one who once held my hand across fields, who shielded me from bullies, was now bowing her head, admitting fault. In that moment, I no longer saw only a traitor. I saw the sister who had once meant the world to me. "I don't want empty apologies," I said slowly. "What I need isn't kneeling or begging for forgiveness. I need the truth. Why? Why was it so easy for this family to erase me?" My father closed his eyes, then opened them again. For the first time, I saw genuine regret flicker there. "Because I was weak," he admitted. "I let gossip, pressure, and appearances cloud my judgment. Claire and Joel believed you were a shadow, the reason they couldn't shine. Instead of defending you, I stayed silent. That silence was the greatest mistake of my life." Mother reached for my hand, her eyes wet. "My child, I never stopped loving you. But I was so afraid. So I chose silence, even though I knew it hurt you. Every night I blamed myself. I didn't think you'd read it, but you did, and you came back. Thank you." Tears threatened to spill. I squeezed her hand, feeling each wrinkle, each trace of time etched into her skin. For years, I believed she abandoned me. Now I understood. She too was a prisoner of silence, bound by invisible chains. Joel shifted uncomfortably, then stepped forward. He no longer carried arrogance, but the look of a man desperate to salvage what he could. "Ethan," he said softly, "I was wrong. I was jealous of you. I was afraid you'd outshine me, take everything I had. But it was fear that made me lose it all, including you. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just hope you'll give me a chance to make it right." I studied him for a long while. In my memories, Joel had once taught me how to kick a ball, once steadied the bicycle as I wobbled down the road, and he was also the one who laughed when the family turned its back on me. The memories tangled, leaving me aching and conflicted. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," I finally said, "but maybe it's time we stop carrying hatred like a stone in our chests." The room fell quiet again. Then, unexpectedly, Mother placed her hand on my shoulder, her voice gentle yet firm. "We've already lost too much. Let's not lose any more. Start again, Ethan. Not for the past, but for the future." Her words pulled something tight inside me, tugging me back. I inhaled deeply, letting the tears fall freely this time. "All right," I whispered, "we'll try again." But this time, no more silence. That day, we sat together for hours, not to reopen every wound, but to face them, name them, and acknowledge them. Tears dropped onto the old wooden table, but laughter rose too when we recalled brighter memories. For the first time in years, the lakeside house didn't feel cold anymore. A week later, I returned with a small suitcase. I didn't plan to stay forever, but I wanted to help rebuild the house. My father and I replaced the rotting boards on the porch. Joel painted the doors with me. Claire and Mother replanted the garden beds. Day by day, little by little, the cracks in our family began to fill. One evening, as we sat around the fire, Claire handed me a small wooden box. Inside lay my grandfather's old pocket watch, the one I thought Father had given to Joel long ago. "No," Father shook his head. "It's yours. It always was. I was wrong to let it go elsewhere." I held the watch, and it felt like holding a thread that tied the past to the present. That night, I stepped out onto the porch, gazing at the moonlit lake. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from inside. I closed my eyes, took a long breath, and smiled. At last, I could let go, not of the memories, not of the truth, but of the pain that had chained me for so long. My family was never perfect. We had betrayed, wounded, and broken each other in ways that seemed irreparable. But it was those very fractures that taught us the value of mending. And in that moment, I knew. I was no longer the one erased from the family. I was Ethan, part of them, forever.